What if your body wasn't just punished, but turned into a warning for every woman who dared to defy? Picture a chamber carved from cold medieval stone, buried deep beneath a fortress that once echoed with screams. The air is thick, damp, metallic, heavy with secrets. Along the far wall, under the flicker of a dying torch, something glints in the half-light. At first glance, it looks like armor, ornate, curved, shaped with precision. But its proportions betray it. This wasn't forged for a soldier. It wasn't made for defense. It was built for a woman. Its iron curves trace the softness of the female form. Its purpose, not swift death, but degradation, humiliation, and agony. The device did not kill quickly. It lingered. It turned pain into performance, stretching suffering across hours, sometimes days. The woman's body became a canvas, her torment the message. A message to every watching eye. Obedience is survival, silence is virtue. This wasn't justice. It was theater. A macabre ritual staged to remind women that their bodies did not belong to them. Before we descend deeper into this forgotten darkness, consider subscribing to History Remains. Your support helps us unearth the stories buried by fear and faith, because these devices, crafted by men, sanctified by religion, and sustained by terror, reveal something terrifyingly human: how cruelty can be moralized, and how suffering can be disguised as salvation. But who forged such instruments? And why did Europe accept them and their silence for centuries? To understand that, we must return to where it began. A world built on control, shame, and the fear of female power. Because before a device could be made to torment a woman, the idea that she deserved torment had to take root. Medieval Europe wasn't ruled by reason. It was ruled by doctrine, by fear, and by a hierarchy where women stood firmly at the bottom. Religious teaching declared that woman was not man's equal, but his burden, spiritually weak, morally unstable, dangerously bound to temptation. Her body was believed to be sin itself, the gateway through which evil entered the world. Siv's hunger for knowledge in the Garden of Eden became her eternal crime. Her defiance was rewritten as betrayal, and from that betrayal came the logic: if woman could fall, she must be watched. If she could tempt, she must be restrained. The church preached it, the law enforced it, and generation after generation, society obeyed. Feudal law did not protect women. It contained them. Obedience was expected. Deviation was punished, often publicly. A man might pay a fine for violence. A woman might face the whip, the brand, or the stake. Her crime as simple as speaking out, refusing marriage, or being accused of immorality by a jealous neighbor. Female independence, even the hint of it, was seen as rebellion not just against men, but against God. And so the instruments of torture became symbols of faith, of order, tools to purify, to correct, to control. Some were adapted for women, others were created for them, crafted to fit the female body perfectly, not for comfort, but for destruction. Among the most horrifying was a device as cruel as it was symbolic: the breast ripper. At first glance, it seemed almost simple. 4 sharp iron claws curved inward like the talons of a beast, mounted on iron tongs or attached to a handle. Sometimes it was heated over open flames until it glowed red, the metal hissing, the air alive with heat. Then it was clamped onto a woman's breast and torn away, no metaphor, flesh ripped from bone, nerves, muscle, skin, shredded in an instant. The pain was beyond imagination. Death was slow, often by blood loss or infection. But death wasn't the goal. Terror was, because these punishments weren't done in secret. They were performed before crowds, husbands, neighbors, priests, all watching as a woman's body was destroyed to prove a point. In 14th century Germany, chronicles describe one such execution: a woman accused of poisoning her husband. Her punishment? Public mutilation. Her breasts torn from her body before she was hanged. Another tale, half legend, half truth, appears in the grim pages of witch-hunting manuals, like the Malleus Maleficarum. The authors wrote with cold conviction: Women should be punished where they have sinned most. It wasn't enough to make them suffer. Their punishment had to mean something. Every act of cruelty carried symbolism. The womb gave life. The breast sustained it. To mutilate the breast was to desecrate creation itself, to turn the sacred into the shameful. This message echoed across centuries. A woman's power, her ability to love, to nurture, to give life, could be twisted into her greatest vulnerability. If she stepped beyond the boundaries of obedience, that power would be the first thing stripped from her. But what if pain on the surface wasn't enough? What if her punishment needed to come from within, hidden, silent, unseen, until it was too late? Then came the Pear of Anguish, small, almost delicate. A hollow bulb of metal, smooth on the outside, shaped like a pear. At the turn of a screw, it blossomed open, a flower of iron and cruelty. Slowly, silently, its petals spreading apart inside soft flesh. This device wasn't made for soldiers or thieves. It wasn't built to crush bones or spill blood, at least not at first. It was reserved for the unseen crimes. Women accused of abortion, of loving other women, of speaking too boldly, of rejecting a man's touch, sins without evidence, but enough to damn them. Different versions existed, some inserted into the mouth, others into the vagina or rectum. But when used against women, it most often targeted the womb or the voice. Two symbols of creation and power. Once inside, the torturer turned the screw. The metal expanded. The tearing began quietly. The screams came later. It didn't always kill. Often it left its victims alive, broken, disfigured, silenced. A woman might live, but never bear children again. Never speak clearly again. The purpose was not death, but transformation, to leave her body forever altered, a living warning to every other woman who might forget her place. Imagine the scene, a damp chamber beneath a monastery. The woman bound to a rough wooden table. A priest stands nearby, eyes cold and sanctified, watching as the torturer turns the screw. Her mouth opens in a soundless scream as the petals unfold inside her. The only sound, the slow creak of iron, no audience, no trial. Just the quiet destruction of something sacred. Sometimes the church called it purification, a ritual to cleanse the soul of sin. But there was nothing holy in it. The pear was not an instrument of justice. It was an instrument of erasure, designed to annihilate what society feared most: the woman who could speak, the woman who could choose, the woman who could create. It silenced the womb, the mouth, the soul, and yet some women did not scream. Some endured, and for them, society had something worse, something they would wear, not just in the chamber, but in the streets, in their homes, in their sleep, a prison made of iron, shaped like a garment. At first glance, it looked like armor, molded to the curve of the ribs and hips, like a knight's breastplate. But this was no protection. This was the punishment, the Iron Corset, forged not for battle but for obedience. This was not a punishment of hours, it was a punishment of existence. A slow, suffocating war against breath itself. Constructed of thick bands of metal, it was locked shut with bolts and rivets. Some versions had spikes along the inside, pressing into flesh with every movement. Others were weighted, pulling on the spine, crushing the ribs, making every breath shallow, every step agony. Death was rare. That wasn't the goal. The goal was correction. Many victims weren't even convicted of crimes. They were wives who spoke too loudly, daughters who defied, women accused of laziness, impurity, or simple disobedience. And unlike most torture, this one was portable. The woman wore her punishment. Under her clothes, under her skin, she cooked, cleaned, and prayed while the iron dug into her sides. Every breath scraped against steel. Every movement bruised her ribs. Every word she tried to speak trembled with pain. In France and Italy, records describe young girls locked into such devices for moral reform. In Germany, it was used to discipline the defiant. Often no judge was needed. A husband's order was enough. No court. No appeal. Just metal. and silence. But the true horror wasn't the pain, it was the message. That a woman's body was never her own. That even her breath could be controlled. That suffering could be virtue. If it kept her quiet, the corset transformed what was once beautiful, femininity, grace, sensuality, into something suffocating. It turned the symbol of womanhood into her prison. The body became the battlefield. The punishment became the garment. Imagine living inside your punishment. Not for an hour, not for a trial, but for days, weeks, for life, and still, for those women who dared to speak too loudly, who defied not only their husbands, but the very laws that defined their existence, there waited something even worse. Because while iron could crush the body, another device was made to crush the voice itself. They called it a bridle, but it had no reins. No saddle, no escape. Forged entirely from iron, the Scold's bridle was shaped like a cage for the head, a muzzle that wrapped around the skull, fastened with straps that cut into the cheeks and jaw. But its true cruelty lay inside, a sharp metal spike, curved downward to press against the tongue. The moment the woman tried to speak, it pierced flesh. It was not meant to kill, it was meant to humiliate. Women were forced to wear it for hours, sometimes days, paraded through the streets, bells attached to the sides, so every trembling step rang out. Children laughed. Men pointed. Women turned away. And what crime had earned this? Speaking too much? Complaining? Gossiping? Questioning a husband? A priest or a magistrate? In medieval Britain and Scotland, it became the standard punishment for so-called scolds, a word with no fixed meaning. Any woman with a sharp tongue or a strong mind could be branded as one. And once accused, the punishment was swift. Court records from 16th century Edinburgh tell the stories. One woman disturbed the peace during church, bridled. Another, a widow who quarreled with her neighbor, bridled. No trial, no defense, just silence. The message was unmistakable. A woman's voice was a threat. That spike on the tongue wasn't just physical, it was symbolic. It pierced through centuries of female storytelling. The passing of wisdom from mother to daughter, healer to patient, midwife to bride. It criminalized speech itself. Wearing the bridle meant losing identity. No words, no expressions, just iron, just the echo of your own breath inside a cage, meant to reshape who you were. And when it was finally removed, the damage didn't always heal. Some women never spoke clearly again. Others chose never to speak at all. The Scold's bridle left no visible scars, only silence, only shame, a quiet reminder of how easily a woman's voice could be weaponized and then erased. But even now, one final device remains, perhaps the most infamous of all. A machine so terrifying it became legend. The Iron Maiden, a towering coffin-like sarcophagus lined with spikes, said to embrace its victims in a kiss of death. For centuries, it was shown as the pinnacle of medieval cruelty, the ultimate torture. But what if the entire story was a lie? Historians now know the Iron Maiden, as we imagine it, was never real. It was not medieval. It was invented, an 18th century fabrication built by museum curators and showmen to thrill audiences hungry for horror. There are no medieval records, no testimonies, no court documents. The first example appeared in Nuremberg in the 1800s, centuries after the supposed era of its use, and yet the legend endures. As it spread, artists and storytellers gave the device a new form. Female Iron Maidens, sculptures of twisted beauty, shaped with exaggerated curves, even molded breasts. The interior spikes positioned with obscene precision. They were never forged for torture. They were forged for fantasy. And perhaps that's what makes them even more disturbing, because they reveal not medieval cruelty, but modern desire, a fantasy of domination, a fascination with the female body as a site of punishment, a spectacle of suffering sold behind glass with a price of admission. What does it say about us that we invented a torture device just to imagine women inside it? Even now, some museums display these false relics, whispering stories of maids in iron crushed to death. The myth survives because it feeds something older and darker than truth itself, the idea that women deserve punishment not for what they do, but for what they are. Fiction becomes memory. Myth becomes history, and yet, beneath that falsehood lies a deeper truth. Society never needed an Iron Maiden. It already had real devices, real pain, real women, women whose suffering needed no exaggeration, only remembrance. So why are we so fascinated with pain? And why, even after all these centuries, does it so often wear a woman's face? Maybe it's because we've never truly reckoned with the structures that made cruelty look like justice. Maybe it's because, even now, we're still haunted by how easily violence can become entertainment. And maybe, just maybe, the Iron Maiden, real or not, still stands for something terrifyingly real, a culture that turns silence into virtue, submission into law, and womanhood into a cage. These instruments weren't born from madness. They were engineered, sanctioned, perfected. Every hinge, every spike, every iron clasp was designed with purpose, to remind women that their bodies were not sacred, not sovereign, not safe. That obedience meant survival. That silence was virtue, the breast ripper, the Pear of Anguish, the Iron Corset, the Scold's Bridle. These were never mere punishments. They were performances. Public rituals meant to strip not just the flesh, but the identity, the dignity, the very spirit from women deemed disobedient. And yet, most of them are forgotten, reduced to museum curiosities, mislabeled relics of primitive times, or rewritten into myths like the Iron Maiden, sanitized, romanticized, safely distant. But that forgetting is its own kind of violence, because when we erase the tools, we erase the women. When we turn their suffering into spectacle, we repeat the same sin that created it. So what does it say about us, about any civilization, that it needed devices to break women into silence? And what does it mean if we forget them now? Maybe that's the cruelest truth of all, that the iron may rust, but the idea behind it, obedience disguised as morality, still lingers, unseen, unquestioned, waiting to be remembered.